Just outside San Francisco, I was scheduled to interview Dr. Dean Edell, a radio and television personality who reports on health and science issues.
I don't think the Gerson's therapy has ever cured a terminally ill patient. People get very confused by this. This is a world of science, a world of data. I always like to think of it as a courtroom, the courtroom of science and medicine. You don't send somebody to jail or convict somebody without hard evidence. And Gerson has been looked at many, many times. If you think of basically what's in Gerson therapy, you really wouldn't expect it to cure cancer. But people, sometimes cancer cures itself. There is a rate of cancer that goes away by itself. Some people didn't really have cancer. It was a misdiagnosis. Sometimes people had chemotherapy many months before and then try, for instance, Gerson therapy. They get better and attribute it to the Gerson therapy or whatever they've done. So, no, I don't think there's any evidence that anybody's ever been cured by Gerson
and
therapy.
Then I met Dr. Stephen Barrett, who is highly regarded by the medical establishment as an authority on health fraud.
I don't believe there's any evidence that any diet will affect the course of any cancer. Take the Gerson therapy, for example. Gerson was a physician who claimed that he could cure cancer with diet and a number of other methods. There's absolutely no scientific evidence that he's cured anyone.
Dr. Barrett is also an author, and his work is widely distributed to colleges and universities.
There are testimonials. There are some people who've been tricked into thinking that it worked for them. But some of them may not have had cancer. Some of them were not adequately studied. The Gerson Clinic has not had any systematic follow-up. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Considering that both Dr. Dean Edell and Dr. Wallace Sampson stated that no one has ever been cured of anything on the Gerson therapy, I visited the Gerson Institute and found over 100 more patients on file. I selected 2 at random and requested interviews.
The day that my oncologist gave me 3 to 6 months to live, I had to go home and tell my children. That was the first thing on my mind, to tell them. And I was devastated. My husband had to practically carry me out of the office. I went home and I told them. I had 2 teenagers there. And my daughter was 17. She was in her senior year of high school. And she cried. She told me, "Mom, you're supposed to be there when I get married, when I have my first baby." And my son, he just went silent. I had 2 big tumors on my liver, and I stayed there for 2 weeks. After the first week, I started feeling better. I started gaining weight. I had hope. And after 2 weeks there, I went home. But 10 months on the diet, I had my first scan, my CT scan, and it was clear.
I wondered if it was possible this was a made-up story, that she was lying.
I attended a cancer support group at a church that we went to. And during that time, I was the only one that was doing alternative therapies. Everyone else was doing conventional. And I watched each and every one of them die.
She then gave me her official diagnosis.
As I would see my oncologist, he expected me to die. He gave me 3 to 6 months to live. And as I did the Gerson therapy, I wasn't dying. I was getting better. I was looking much better, feeling better, and he would ask me from time to time what I was doing. I would try to tell him about the juicing, yet he didn't want to hear it.
Then came the other patient with testicular cancer.
When I spoke with the oncologist about this Gerson therapy, he looked at me and he said that was probably going to be a mistake because the chemotherapy was going to help me and not any other treatment. Yes, and after I had gone back to the oncologist after I had done the Gerson therapy for a couple months, at that time when they had found that I was cured of cancer from the CT scan that they had done on my abdomen, he couldn't believe it. He thought it was a miracle. He had no explanation for it, and he was just amazed. My last appointment with my oncologist was approximately 10 years ago.
The gentleman that had the testicular cancer was actually a doctor himself. I was amazed how easy it was to get patients to come forward. I did not pay them to speak. I then met with Dr. Wallace Sampson, clinical professor emeritus at Stanford University, and editor of the Scientific Review of Alternative Medicine. Today he took me for a walk instead of his dog.
Well, the reason we don't like these therapies is, first of all, to give people false hope. And they're rip-offs. You know, there's someone making a big profit off of this kind of activity. And that's just morally wrong. Morally wrong, ethically wrong. It's not right from any aspect at all.
Well, has the Gerson therapy ever cured a cancer patient?
Well, of course not. They won't even release their records. They published one paper on something called melanoma, skin cancer, but they selected the cases they reported. They didn't report everything that happened. They don't keep that kind of a record on all patients, so they have nothing to show us. And yet they keep on making the same claims that they made in the 1920s when Dr. Gerson first came over here from Germany, 1930s. But he was doing this for tuberculosis and other diseases also.
What would it take for you to be convinced or even persuaded a slight bit that this therapy is, has credibility?
Well, first of all, they have to show some reason why it should work. We know how cancers behave, and we know the kinds of things that cause cancer. So they have to come up with some kind of a believable theory of why their diet should work. But second of all, they'd have to convince us that everything we know about it in the past 50 years is wrong, and they're right. Now, how are they going to come up with material like that? I decided to take that test on the 15th floor of a hotel room in Tokyo. I studied a published paper by a renowned Japanese surgeon and researched as much information as I could find about the Japanese medical community and their experiences with Dr. Gerson's work, if any. It was now day 45, and I would give myself 5 days to research and verify Dr. Gerson's claims, using the scientific modality of replication, confirmation, and publication. I figured that if I gave myself only 5 days to prove or disprove Gerson's therapy, that would be a reasonable amount of time for even the most hardened skeptic from some other cancer research organization or medical branch to at least look into what Dr. Gerson had done. If a skeptic would be unwilling to spend even that short amount of time, I would have to then conclude that there is definitely a closed-mindedness and a bias that is bigger than Texas and Alaska combined. First, I took the bullet train from Tokyo to a nearby town called Fukushima, where I was scheduled to meet 2 doctors who study cancer and meticulous in their record keeping. It is here at the Loma Linda Clinic that a precedent was set 16 years ago when one of these doctors developed cancer himself, colon cancer that metastasized to his liver, and by accident found Dr. Gerson's book. Trying to be as cynical and skeptical as possible, like the CEO of some drug company, I look forward to hearing and seeing the evidence in the courtroom of blind justice.
My name is Dr. Yoshihiko Hoshino. About 16 years ago, I was suffered from colon cancer. I changed to Gerson therapy. And over these 16 years, I continued to take a Gerson therapy. The metastatic liver cancer disappeared. I underwent ultrasound echo examination, and at that examination, there is no metastatic liver cancer in the liver. Over these 15 years, over 500 patients with the cancer visited here, Loma Linda Clinic. At first, we'd like to try to statistical analysis.
This statistical analysis is already well underway on these 500 cancer patients treated with the Gerson therapy, and well over half of them are cured or recovering. The scientific tracking and data is over a period of years and continues. While I was doing this interview, one of the patients came to visit and get updated on his condition of prostate cancer. The doctors and this private patient agreed to leave the doors open, allowing me to scrutinize and question with my cameras. Dr. Tominaga was explaining to this patient via data and x-rays how his prostate cancer had spread to the bones of his spine. But after the Gerson therapy, his cancer is completely gone. It is difficult for me to express how I felt to see this amazing sample of success. I was elated and frustrated at the same time. Happy for him because he had found doctors that are free to practice the true medicine. Frustrated because in many other countries this is denied and people pay with their lives. It affects us all profoundly, whether we have cancer or not.